weaponized charm power, and fear. Anyone who pushed back was suddenly fined, cited, or worse, removed. That's what happened to George and Linda Bishop, an older couple who lived 2 doors down from the construction site. George had questioned a zoning variance during an HOA meeting, citing noise pollution and disruption to migratory birds. 2 days later, they received a formal notice their front-facing garage violated updated design standards. That garage had stood untouched since 1984. A week after that, they were fined $300 for non-compliant lawn edging. Then came the big one: failure to comply with repeated violations will result in legal review and possible eviction under Covenant Clause 9.7. They couldn't fight it. They didn't have the money or the strength. Within a month, their house was empty, their porch swing still swaying in the breeze, like it was waiting for someone who wouldn't come back. I took pictures of their notice. I saved every email they forwarded to me. Linda cried when they left. I told her everything would be okay. I meant it, because the more Karen bullied the neighborhood, the more I let her believe she won. Every shovel of dirt they turned over was another nail in their legal coffin. I watched as contractors rerouted storm water without permits, slicing through tree roots and filling wetlands with gravel. They buried protected land under the lie of expansion. I notified the EPA anonymously and filed 3 separate environmental complaints, each one backed with GPS coordinates and time-stamped photos, but I didn't file them in my name. Not yet. I needed them to build more, because every violation stacked higher meant a harder fall. The HOA was too drunk on power to see it. Karen held town hall meetings in the unfinished food court, giving tours to investors and pretending the smell of wet drywall was perfume. This project will triple our home value, she announced, as though everyone wasn't already 3 months behind on their HOA dues because she'd raised fees to pay for it all. I stood in the back sipping punch and pretending to be impressed, even as I photographed every exposed pipe, every blocked fire exit, every OSHA violation. They didn't think anyone would notice. I let her bask in it, let her wave her arms in front of blueprints like a game show host, let her enjoy her illusion of control, all while my cameras caught contractors dumping construction debris in the creek behind Lot 12, land that on paper still legally belonged to me. My favorite moment came during the community appreciation barbecue thrown by Karen to smooth over complaints about the rising HOA fees. She handed out tote bags with the mall logo and little flyers that read, "Built for us, by us." I nearly choked on my pulled pork. I asked her very casually in front of 2 realtors and the county treasurer, "Hey, Karen, did you ever find the original title transfer for this parcel? Just curious." Her smile froze. "Oh, don't worry," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "It's all been handled." I nodded. "Cool. Would love to see it sometime, family history and all." She excused herself within seconds. That night I caught her assistant rooting around my mailbox. I didn't confront him. I just watched through the night vision lens and added another clip to the trespassing folder on my hard drive. The file was getting heavy. Even heavier were the receipts. HOA expense reports were suddenly private, but they weren't protected very well. Karen's assistant used a cloud folder for internal drafts, which he left unencrypted. One Google search of his full name, and a few hours of browsing later, I had everything: the budget breakdown, the donor list, the discretionary fund that paid for Karen's leased BMW, which she claimed was a security patrol vehicle, $11,000 in consulting fees to a firm her brother owned. I wasn't even mad. I was impressed. She turned HOA grift into high art, but every dollar she stole was going into a structure she didn't own that made it mine. Every violation she committed, mine. Every unauthorized foundation, mine. She was building my empire with stolen bricks, and she didn't even know it. By week 12, Willow Point Plaza had a working food court, full electrical, and tenants preparing for soft openings. The grand ribbon cutting was announced for the following month. Karen's face was printed on the flyer alongside the mayor, and the tagline read, "A new era begins." I stuck it to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a pig and circled the date in red. I started dressing nicer, showing up to meetings again, wearing the boots my grandfather gave me and the button-up he wore when he closed his last land deal. Karen's confidence was untouchable. By then, her voice louder, her smile sharper. The woman was practically vibrating with self-satisfaction. We turned a forgotten piece of land into a beacon of hope. She told the HOA during a vote to raise fees another 7%. "This will go down in history." She wasn't wrong. It would just not the way she thought. I kept nodding, clapping, smiling. I even complimented her speech. "Incredible work, Karen, seriously inspiring." She beamed. The moment was close now, so close I could taste it all. I had to do was wait. Just a little longer, let them finish the inside, let them stock the stores, let them hang that final now open banner across the front. Because when they finally stepped back to admire what they'd built, I'd be right there and I wouldn't be clapping. The room was already half full when I walked in. Rows of plastic chairs filled with HOA board members, a few of the more nosy residents, and 3 people from the local paper scribbling notes beside their camera gear. Karen Monroe stood near the front of the room, all crisp lines and power posture, chatting up a man from the county zoning office like she owned the air. They breathed. Her smile tightened slightly when she saw me, but she kept up the ACT. Didn't think we'd see you here tonight, she said, her tone syrupy sweet and condescending. We assumed you'd finally made peace with the project. Oh, I replied, removing my jacket slowly and laying it across the back of a chair in the front row. I've made peace with a lot of things. She raised a brow, confused. I turned and faced the room, clearing my throat. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know this was called on short notice, but given the scope of recent development, I think we can all agree a community safety review is long overdue. A few scattered nods from the residents. Karen stiffened. I thought this was a budget discussion. It was going to be, I replied, but then I found something interesting. Several somethings, actually. The projector behind me flickered. On the first slide was an aerial photo of Willow Point Plaza taken from my drone. The mall, in all its glossy, smug glory, perched right in the center of the old farmland. My farmland. This is the completed structure, I said, clicking through high residential images of every corner. Foundations, electrical trenches, HVAC install, storm drains built entirely without the consent of the deed holder. Karen scoffed. We've been over this. The parcel was zoned for development and zoned. I cut her off. Sure, but zoned doesn't mean transferred, and that's the first thing we're going to address. I clicked to the next slide. A scanned document filled the wall, the certified deed from 1982, signed by my grandfather, later updated by my father, and finally me. Then came the highlight. A clause boxed in red said parcels shall remain exempt from HOA governance and zoning transfer unless explicitly executed by current deed holder with notarized approval. I paused and let the silence settle. Karen blinked, visibly rattled. Now, that clause has no bearing on current development approvals, she said, quickly glancing toward the zoning official. We filed everything with the county. You filed incomplete paperwork, I said, and conveniently failed to verify ownership. You know what that's called. I flipped to the next slide. Forgery and unlawful construction statutes in bold letters. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges for that alone. The room was dead silent now, except for the scribbling pens of the reporters. Now let's move on to something a little more expensive. I pulled a slim envelope from my satchel and placed it on the lectern. Inside this envelope is a notarized legal notice drafted by my attorney and filed with the county records office earlier today. I opened it, unfolded the document, and read it aloud. As of this date, legal ownership of all standing commercial structures within parcel 1149, including but not limited to buildings, utilities, signage, and infrastructural improvements, is hereby transferred to the sole registered landowner under reversionary clause 9C, as filed in 1982 and reaffirmed in 1996 and 2009. Ownership is exclusive and binding regardless of third-party investment, contract, labor, or financing arrangements. The zoning inspector looked up, his mouth slightly open. Wait, you mean yes, I said, everything they built now legally belongs to me. Every square inch of that $12 million mall. The room erupted. A dozen people started talking at once, half in disbelief, the others in awe. Karen didn't move. She stared straight ahead like she'd just been stabbed in the chest. Her skin was paper white. I clicked to the final slide. An offer letter from a national real estate investment trust, bold letter, signed yesterday. We are prepared to offer $18.6 million for full rights and access to Willow Point Plaza, contingent upon proof of ownership and free title. I held up the sign page for everyone to see. So not only do I own it, but someone already wants to buy it at a profit. Karen finally found her voice. This is a trick. You can't just steal back a project we spent months building. No, I said, smiling. You stole the land. I just let you spend a fortune developing something you never had the right to touch. You poured HOA funds, contract rare budgets, and private investments into my property. Every brick you laid, every pipe you buried, it all belongs to me now. One of the board members leaned toward Karen and whispered furiously. Another stood up and walked out. I turned toward the zoning official. By the way, this is going to get messy for your office too. Someone over there failed to verify land ownership before approving construction. Permits, I suggest you look into that before my attorney calls. He paled and reached for his phone. You can't do this, Karen repeated, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I already did, I replied calmly. And here's the best part. Because you used HOA funds without proper disclosure, every homeowner in this neighborhood technically invested in my mall. I turned back to the crowd. So I'd like to personally thank you all for your contributions. I'll be putting them to very good use, gasps a few chuckles. One woman clapped before realizing what she was doing. Karen grabbed at straws. We'll fight it, we'll sue, we'll drag this out for years. I pulled another envelope from my bag, this one smaller, heavier. That's cute, I said. But the title office disagrees, so does my buyer. And if you want to go to court, go right ahead, but you'll be doing it from your own pockets this time, because you're already under investigation for misuse of HOA funds. That budget ledger you lost, I found it, and I forwarded to the state attorney's office last week. Karen's face finally cracked, her hands trembled, her mouth opened, but no words came. I walked slowly over to her, leaned in, and whispered so only she could hear, "You should have left my land alone." Then I turned to the crowd and held up the final document, my formal declaration of ownership, signed, sealed, and filed. This isn't a protest, I said. This is a transfer of power. You've all been living under a queen. It's time to welcome the landlord. The zoning official stood and confirmed the notice. The reporters took 100 photos, and Karen just sat there, staring at the ground, while the empire she'd built on my soil collapsed beneath her like the house of cards it always was. I had let her think she'd won, let her celebrate, parade, brag, and now I owned it all, with her money, with her votes, with her name on every receipt. It was the most satisfying real estate deal of my life, and I hadn't paid a single cent. It started like a slow tremor, whispers in driveways, quiet gasps over coffee, but by the end of the week, it was a full-blown earthquake. Karen Monroe's empire cracked, then crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. The story broke in the local news. First mall built on private land, HOA faces legal bombshell. Then the regional outlets picked it up. By Monday, a state investigator was on site reviewing the financial records I'd so generously leaked to the press. HOA members who once smiled with Karen at ribbon cuttings now refused to answer her calls. They were too busy talking to their lawyers. A special emergency meeting was called this time. Without Karen, the board had no choice. Facing accusations of financial mismanagement, embezzlement, and reckless governance, they voted unanimously to remove her as president. A few members tried to distance themselves, claiming they were misled and unaware of the land's true ownership. But I had the receipts. I had emails, timestamps, minutes from closed meetings they thought were private. And now, so did the state attorney's office. One by one, they fell like dominoes. Karen's closest allies on the board resigned under pressure, some to avoid deeper SC scrutiny, others because the heat got too real. I watched it all unfold from my porch with a cold drink in hand, the same way my grandfather used to watch the sun dip behind the wheat fields. Only now those fields had become something more powerful than crops. They were leverage, they were legacy, they were my fortress. Within days, a class action lawsuit began brewing. Angry residents, many of whom never wanted the mall in the first place, realized their HOA fees, thousands of dollars over the past year, had been funneled into a development that now belonged entirely to me. They had paid for Karen's vanity project and then watched me walk away with it. It wasn't just humiliation, it was betrayal. Some demanded refunds, others demanded resignations, a few wanted jail time. I stayed silent. I didn't need to gloat, the facts did it for me. Meanwhile, my phone rang off the hook. The buyer I'd spoken to before, still interested, and now even more eager since I owned the mall, free and clear, with no liens, no partners, and no red tape. We finalized the paperwork. Within a week, $6 million wired directly to my account. I walked into the county recorder's office with the signed transfer documents and walked out a multi-millionaire, and still not a single dollar had left my pocket. The final irony, the HOA had spent more than $3.5 million on the project before construction even began. Legal fees, consulting firms, landscaping, promotional events, all of it gone. Their bank accounts were drained, their reputation ruined, and the mall, it would continue operating, but under new management. My management, the new owner, a retail investment group, was kind enough to rename it in my honor Miller Commons. My grandfather would have laughed himself hoarse. I had had the new sign installed above the main entrance, right where Karen's original Willow Point Plaza letters had been. I didn't invite her to the unveiling. I didn't need to. She saw it anyway, I know, because I saw her car pass the entrance slowly the morning it went up. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. She just drove past. Her biggest failure, one she could never take back. Her house, once the pride of the HOA, started to With her property values dropped, buyers backed out, people talked. Without Karen pulling the strings, her castle fell into disrepair. She tried to hang on, painted the trim, replaced the lawn, but the stench of scandal was too thick. Eventually, a for sale sign appeared out front. I saw the moving truck a few weeks later. Karen standing on the curb with sunglasses covering half her face, didn't even glance at me when I waved. That was fine. I didn't need a goodbye just seeing her climb into the passenger seat of that beat-up sedan, her leased BMW. Repossessed months ago, was enough. Across the street, new board members were being elected, people with actual integrity, or at least enough fear not to follow in her footsteps. The HOA's power shrank to what it should have been all along: lawn disputes, fence approvals, and sumer potlucks. No more empires, no more malls. And as for my land, it was now fully immune from HOA oversight. I filed a declaration of exemption backed by historical documents, court recognition, and of course a hefty donation to the local historical preservation society. I even built a little fence more symbolic than anything else, marking the edge of the property. No trespassing, no surveying, no development, not unless I say so. And believe me, I won't. Funny thing is, I didn't need the money. I mean, yeah, it's nice to sit on a few $1,000,000, and sure, I bought myself a new truck and fixed up the old farmhouse, but that wasn't the point. This was never about getting rich. It was about proving a truth my grandfather drilled into me when I was still learning to walk. Rose in a cornfield land isn't just dirt, boy. It's legacy, its roots, and if someone tries to take it, you don't just stop them, you make them wish they never tried. And that's exactly what I did. Karen tried to build a kingdom on my soil. She poured concrete over my history and thought she'd buried me with it. But all she did was plant the seed for her own downfall. Now I sit on the porch most mornings sipping coffee, while contractors polish the mall's glass windows down below. I still call it mine. Even though I sold it, doesn't matter. The story belongs to me. The land always did. And when people ask how I pulled it off, I just smile and say they built me a mall. I let them, then I sold it. And then I watch the silence hit them when they realize what that means, what it really means. I didn't just beat the HOA, I used them. I turned their greed into my gold, their arrogance into my leverage, their signatures into a binding promise they never read. That farmland they saw as empty space, it became the most powerful legal trap in town, and they walked right into it, eyes wide, wallets open, thinking they were the ones in control. But I was always in the driver's seat, always. All I had to do was wait, let them dig their own grave. And now I'm retired, comfortable, and free. The HOA never bothers me. They know better. Everyone does. Karen's name, it's never mentioned. Her legacy is a cautionary tale whispered behind hedges and mailbox posts. And me, I'm the guy who turned a field into a fortune without ever lifting a shovel. I just sat still and let them build my future brick by brick. Sometimes power doesn't come from fighting back immediately. It comes from patience, from watching carefully, and from gathering enough evidence to bring the truth into the light and let justice speak for itself. The lesson here isn't about revenge. It's about protecting your legacy, your values, and what's rightfully yours in a smart and rightful way. Never underestimate your right to ownership, your right to be informed, and your right to stand up when wronged. The law, when used correctly, isn't a barrier. It's a powerful tool. And above all, never let the arrogant believe they can build an empire on someone else's sweat, land, and peace without paying the price. Protect your land. Protect your principles. Stay steady. Because as this story proves, not everyone who builds something owns it. The true owner is the one who never forgets whose soil it really is.